Welcome to Cheques and Balances. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And today's topic, how to retire at 50.
Great. Okay, so Mike, we said we'd keep these topics a little bit of fun, a little bit different, not just talking about decimal points and investments, although there'll be some investments today. Sorry. So tip number one, how to retire at 50, rob a bank.
Yeah, absolutely. Get the balaclava, get the gun, get out there. Don't do that.
Is that the end of the podcast? We got anything else?
Cut.
No. Okay, so don't rob a bank, please. That's not a good idea. They're lovely people at the banks. So firstly, you have to think about, what does retiring at 50 mean? Retiring at 50 shouldn't mean sitting on the couch doing nothing. What we're really talking about with the word retirement is we're talking about options.
So having the freedom or the availability to go out and do what you want. So, you shouldn't be thinking like this if you're in your young 20s anyway, but if you want to quit your job and you want to go do something else, that's what we're talking about when we say retire. You might think, I've always wanted to work outdoors. I've always wanted to guide people around the Milford track, or I've always wanted to, be a park ranger or something like that. This is about giving you the flexibility to do that, or even if you just want to dramatically cut down the number of hours that you're working.
Yeah, because a lot of people kind of get stuck with a paycheck and their life revolves around the paycheck and they can't go out and do the different things they want to do. I had a great year, by the way, Mike, on the Milford track. It was a lot of fun. That'll be another episode.
Yeah.
Probably not. But apart from just finding another job that you're interested in, it might also be, I want to have the flexibility to start a business, or I want to spend more time with my kids, or I never got to do my OE and I'd like to spend 2 years traveling the world.
Absolutely.
In addition to having the flexibility to go and do all of these things, which is what retiring at 50 is all about, is acknowledging that this goal is hard, right, Mike? This is not a goal that everybody will be able to achieve.
Yeah, and that's based on keeping your costs down, growing your income as much as possible, so your salary, and then a third topic that you'll hear us talk about, pretty regularly on the podcast, but today as well, is that passive income, right? So building that income where you're not selling your time every day to get that income coming into your bank account.
Yeah. So a salary is exchanging your time for money. The idea behind passive income is you might own part of a company, you might have an investment property, part of a commercial property, part of your own kind of smaller business, whatever it might be, that is always working for you in the background, and you're kind of getting paid while you're sitting on the couch watching Netflix.
Absolutely.
Great. The other key part, as well as income and expenses, is also around, being comfortable taking some risk. Putting money in a term deposit, leaving money in the bank, just paying off your mortgage is not enough. Yep. There's a couple of key concepts in here. It's around taking calculated risk, having enough time for your investments to work with you, because they're not just going to move in a linear fashion. They're going to bobble up, they're going to bobble down, and to take this kind of level of risk, you're going to have to be comfortable with it dropping over periods of time. I tell my clients, Mike, that markets generally work in 7-year cycles. So there's 3 really good years, there's 3 kind of boring years, and there's 1 bad year. And if you've got a growth type investment, depending what it is, obviously, if it's completely concentrated in one thing, it could drop all the way to 0, but something diversified, you've got to be comfortable with maybe it dropping 30% over a 12-month period.
Absolutely. So we're going to try and keep this podcast light on the stats, although with scenarios for these sorts of things, it is really tailored to you and how your costs, what your costs are and what your income is and that sort of thing. So I'm always going to recommend that if you do want to know a little bit more about it, come speak to James. He can do a financial plan for you. But we just wanted to run through a scenario just to sort of illustrate that actually this is achievable, even though it is hard.
Yeah, and you can, if you don't want to come and talk to me, maybe you've got your own financial advisor, maybe you're really good with spreadsheets and you've got a spreadsheet that you can have a play around with, but everybody's situation will be different. I said to Mike, Mike, can I run through 20 scenarios? Mike said, if you do that, I don't think our mums will even watch the podcast. So we thought I'd just run through maybe 2.
Yep.
You gonna let me do 2, Mike? Maybe, okay. All right, so scenario 1 is based on a more modest income. If you have a more modest income, this is a lot harder, right? Because you've got to live off less expenses. So say you and your partner both earn about $70,000 a year each. So your household income before tax is $140,000. I've got in this scenario to make this work to be able to maintain an income of $40,000, $50,000 a year in retirement, that kind of 50, that you need to keep your expenses to $30,000 a year. That's not a lot of fun money, is it, Mike?
It's pretty tight, yeah.
Yeah. You have to have a bit of that Scrooge McDuck sort of DNA in you to be able to make that work.
Yeah.
But the idea behind keeping your expenses that low is, I assume that you buy a house and you have about an $800,000 mortgage. If you're 30 years old with that level of income, you should be able to pay off your mortgage over about 13 years.
Yeah.
So that means it's kind of a bit of a race. So you get 13 years to have a debt-free asset that you can live in, and then you've got 7 years to sprint as hard as you can, Mike.
It's a fast sprint.
That is a fast sprint. So the idea is, once you've cleared off your mortgage, then you look at investment options like an index fund or a managed fund. For those that don't know what that is, just like a basket of shares and maybe commercial property, maybe some cash and some bonds, depending on your level of risk. But you'll need to be comfortable with a certain level of risk to make this all work. You regularly contribute your mortgage repayments. You'll have a lump sum by the time you're 50, and then you'll also have your KiwiSaver that'll kick you along a little bit later in life.
Absolutely. So the second scenario that I'll let you run through has a slightly higher income level, but I think it's really important to point out here that, you know, income isn't fixed over people's lives. People's wages generally increase to a point, and, you know, what's really common is as people's wages increase, so do their costs. So does their cost of living. You know, you just naturally tend to spend more. So what I think James is going to focus on here quite a bit is sort of, is going to imply is that you need to keep that cost base down to achieve this goal, even if your income level is going up.
Yeah. It's very easy. It kind of makes a lot of sense going, oh, of course I'll keep my expenses low. But you've got to kind of have that student sort of mentality if this is really important to you. And if it's not as important to you, maybe your goal is to have freedom at 55, or maybe you won't upgrade the house as much. You kind of got a lot of different levers that you can pull.
Cool.
So this second scenario is you're 30 again, you've got a mortgage of $800,000, but you've your household income of $200,000. So you both have reasonable jobs, or if you're single, you've just got the one income working hard for you. Your expenses are a little bit higher, so instead of $30,000, your expenses are $50,000, and then you're able to clear that mortgage. I also assume that you kind of buy a couple of investment properties along the way. So the idea is a long-term buy and hold strategy. So we're not selling them anytime soon. Maybe one of them's worth $1 million, one of them's worth $800,000, and then later in retirement you'll have the rent coming without the mortgage, right, Mike?
Absolutely. And what that will sort of do, like we mentioned, is that passive income. You'll get someone paying in weekly, $600, $700, $800, something like that, which you can then spend.
Yeah. So between the rental, the managed fund income that you'll save after you pay off your mortgage, your KiwiSaver, you've got those kind of streams coming through, which you then, in that scenario, I think you could probably get to that kind of $80,000, $100,000 a year income. So this is, as long as you've got the right kind of income level, you can keep those expenses low. It's then about buying assets that can create you that passive income.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we won't drag it on for too much long, but one of the last things I did want to cover off here is what are some of the key or the common mistakes that people make here?
Yeah, okay. So firstly, we might go through the key strategies. So Toast, if you can bring those up around the screen. So a couple really important reminders is having a modest income. A modest lifestyle is really important, so keeping the expenses low. Reasonable income, maybe you need to get a second, if this is really important to you, maybe you need to get a second job, maybe you both need to be working, maybe you need to start a side hustle, whatever it might be. Buy assets that are going to create you a passive income. They're most commonly going to be shares and property. And one thing I tell all of my clients, Mike, is the best investment, as cheesy as it sounds, is an investment into yourself. So if you've got a skill set where you can start your own business, you're taking all of the risk, but you will get remunerated for that risk. So if you've got the ability to take, instead of, taking 30% of what the business makes, you can take all of it, and then maybe bring on an employee later on and have the passive income, not work full time. That's a really good way to go about it.
Yeah.
A couple of things that are important in terms of where people go wrong is, firstly, the paralysis by analysis. So they just don't get started. Even if you don't have this goal, I would still strongly encourage you all to make steps towards financial freedom. So save whatever you can. If you don't have short-term goals, don't leave the money in the bank account, put it into longer-term assets.
Yep.
If you're not willing to sacrifice the lifestyle, then either you need to grow the top line with your income, or this probably isn't going to work for you.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so we might wrap it up there. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions that you'd like us to tackle in a podcast, please send them through, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
We'll see you next time.